raise your hand. At the end, we will do a full round of Q&A, and then you can choose to get on the mic if you want and ask live. We're going to keep letting some people in because, wow, it like doubled people in the waiting room since we've been talking. We're getting everyone in. Please make sure to keep your microphone and video on mute. Please make sure to keep your microphone and video on mute. And we'll get started in just a second here. Should I just keep
Rachel,
talking?
I love your headphones. It has a little bit of a Princess Leia thing going. I think it's awesome.
Right? I know. I like want to get some like flower stickers and just like because like, yeah,
you should put fake hair braids on like over them and make them actual, like, you know, cinnamon buns. It'd be the best.
When we started doing the video, I was like, I probably should like we're gonna be on video for a while now. I should probably like do something. I don't know what.
Bedazzle. It's calling for bedazzling. I mean, really,
it really is. Yeah, it's a very bro gaming headset, so it needs some pink.
Something sparkly. You need to do it.
Something sparkly, please.
And
okay.
I need something like that too. My AirPods keep falling out of my ears. I don't know if I'm the only one without AirPod shaped ears, but you know, that's the way it goes.
No, mine never stay in my ears either. I can never get them to stay. That's what it is. Okay, so we are going to get started with the sponsor video. We are super excited that everyone is here today and is, you know, going through this process with us over Zoom. We miss seeing your faces so much, but we're super happy that we were able to get this all together. And a big thank you to all of our management companies who invited their homeowner leaders to this and shared, you know, our little like how to Zoom tutorial. And a big thank you to our speakers for being willing to do this over digital as well for Stockton. So we haven't had one in 2 months. We miss you. Okay, so first off, our Stockton Ed Committee is amazing, and they are the ones working on all of this for you. And they are Tracy Fuqua of Common Interest Management, Liz Franco of Kitsakian Property Management, Stephen Murray of GP Landscape, Tom Murphy of Common Interest Management, and Doreen Tejeda of Associa Northern California. Those are the amazing people behind all of this education. And as a follow-up, before I forget, because I never fail to forget this, there will be an eval emailed out to you after this program. So please make sure to fill it out so we know like what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want more of, you know, etc. So we are going to keep letting people in, but I am going to share my screen so we can watch our sponsor video. Pause for dramatic effect.
Levi, Erlinger and Company, CPAs.
Adam Sterling. AMS Incorporated. Black Diamond Paving and Concrete. Black Diamond Roofing Incorporated.
GB Group Contractors Consultants.
IQV Construction and Roofing. JPA Landscape and Construction.
Kasdan Lipsmith Weber Turner.
New Pipes Incorporated. Roof Works and Construction.
Sarman Construction. Witz Painting. Varsity Painting.
AC Enterprises.
Birding Weil. Chapman and Interi.
CM Squared.
For over 18 years and 10,000 satisfied associations, Empire Works can handle any size painting and reconstruction project that you may have. We look forward to doing business with you in 2020.
Benton Grant. Heritage Bank of Commerce. Hughes, Gill, Cochrane, and Tinetti.
The Miller Law Firm, assisting homeowners associations in their construction defect needs for 40 years.
We are Recon 360. We are general contractors specializing in reconstruction, roofing, painting, and maintenance services. Recon 360 gets projects built to code, built on time, and built to budget.
Signature Painting and Construction.
Social Insurance here to show you our stuff. Okay, maybe let's stick to do what we do best, HOA insurance. It's all we do and all we've done for the past 30 years.
Dark Construction.
Woohoo! God, I love that So Sure one. That's so funny. Poor Charlotte. That's me trying to hit a bell. That's not happening. Okay, so we have let even more people into the room. Thank you, Kelvin. So we are going to get started. Again, please make sure to have your microphone and your video on mute. If you have any questions throughout the program or at the end or anything, please type them in the chat. Feel free to talk to each other in the chat too, but do be aware that we are saving the chats and this video is being recorded. So now I would like to welcome our wonderful speakers. Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much, Rachel. So John and I are just so happy to be here talking to you. We of course miss seeing you in person very much and wish we could give everybody hugs. I know I am missing that particularly, but I think this is a really good alternative, and I think maybe more people can attend too because it's virtual. So we have a little bit shorter time than we had last time we did this, so we're going to just kind of dive right in. And if you have questions, they can go via chat and by raising your hand, I think. But we're going to try and get through everything and leave time for some questions at the end. So that's our plan. This topic is such a near and dear to both of our hearts. We're just thrilled to be able to be here and present with you. I feel like we're here because in our industry, it seems like our times are getting meaner, a little bit crueler. We're getting a lot more kind of general unkindness that goes on between people in our communities. I'm getting a lot of calls about people behaving badly. I mean, I always get calls about that, but it just it seems to be escalating. And a lot of times I feel like people are just calling the wrong office. You know, why are they calling a lawyer? You know, they should be calling a psychiatrist or somebody else. And yet we're fielding them. Managers are fielding these calls all the time. And a lot of the bad behavior is due to some underlying mental health issues that are really difficult for us to even identify and figure out, much less figure out how to handle. And then we're seeing a lot of kind of personal struggle, particularly in our industry, but also just generally. The lawyers, for example, have just an astronomical rate of substance abuse and mental illness. The Bar Association recently did a major survey with regard to that, and the results were pretty astounding and horrifying also in terms of how people in my profession are dealing with their mental health and emotional issues in non-productive ways. And I think we're seeing that in every industry, including managers in the HOA industry and just people in general. Suicides are on the rise across all sectors and in all populations. And in general, we're not okay. And we just have this general feeling of not being okay. And now we're under this just extraordinary global pandemic situation. We're kind of on lockdown. There's an incredible amount of uncertainty and anxiety, and it's presenting in a lot of different ways. And I think we all feel like we're going a little crazy. and the mental health issues that we may have already had are being magnified and amplified due to the circumstance that we find ourselves in. So we thought it was really important for us to start to address some of these issues and identify and present some of the tools that we have to deal with them, both in our personal and professional lives going forward. So just as an aside, a very kind friend said in a very kind way, "Hey, Melissa, why do you think you have anything to say about this? You know, you're not a psychiatrist, you're not a licensed therapist or social worker. You know, what's the deal? Why are you doing this?" And my answer to that is, you know, I do have obviously decades of experience as an attorney and as an HOA attorney. So I deal with these issues on basically an everyday basis, as I think John does and many managers do here. My parents are both therapists. My dad's a psychiatrist. My mom is an MFCC. And so I grew up, I'm the shrink kid. You know, I grew up talking around the dinner table about a lot of these different things, which I never realized was super weird until I met other people. And, you know, I'm like, what? You don't talk that way? That's not, so it gives me just a comfort level with talking about things that are really hard for some people to talk about. And also I'm unafraid, I'm used to it. And I just really want to give all of you permission to talk about it too. I think we really need to be unafraid. We need to shine a light on these issues that are really such a big deal in our communities, both our HOA communities and our larger community. And John, I think you had some similar, you know, like a similar pathway to feeling, you know, some personal connection to this topic. I don't want to steal your thunder. Why are you here, John? Right.
Well, I'm here for a couple of reasons. So my name's John Rivera with FirstService Residential. I've been in the industry since 2003. And specifically, this is near and dear to my heart, primarily because I think in our entire industry, one, as professionals, we all just want to do what we can to get the job done and move forward. And sometimes that comes without making certain to take the time to do some self-care. You know, we pour into so many other people that our cup is empty. And I'm hoping that today we can give some practical tools to help people have other people drink from your saucer, not your cup. They should be drinking from your overflow. So just want to talk about some basic things that you can do to take care of yourself and some other resources. And the other reason, honestly, is because, frankly, I have dealt with depression and anxiety for the majority of my life, and I think it's important. I wanted to use the platform today and my position in this discussion to kind of share that, especially in this time. One, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which I think is great. And two, as you already alluded to, Melissa, given the pandemic and the issues that we're facing right now, it's incredibly important for people to realize that they're not isolated and alone, and we need to get rid of the negative stigma that surrounds mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think that, you know, we're going to be talking about some different resources that we can use personally and professionally with our owners. And I think that the point is, John and I have both used many of these resources personally. You know, we can attest how much they work. But there's literally no shame in reaching out for help, and that help is available. And so we're going to be talking a lot about that. John, why don't you run down today's topics today, the slide that's up right now?
Sure, absolutely. Today we're going to be going over the ways mental health issues present in our communities. We'll talk about owner misconduct, management challenges. We'll go through the board dysfunction. We'll be talking about handling situations where mental illness is present, disciplinary options, working with mental health professionals and referrals. And for those of you who are used to enforcement, the thing is that I think in general, a lot of us in, community managers, we tend to check a box in, okay, we've got to do enforcement, and we treat the symptom and not the disease. And I think that's the paradigm shift that we're wanting to make here today. We're going to go over specific examples. In the interest of time, today we're going to specifically go over nuisance conduct and threats, and we'll briefly touch on hoarding and director misconduct, and then fair housing claims and discrimination.
Great. So let's dive right in, because we are short of time, and we want to really talk about this. So what does mental health have to do with HOAs? This may seem like a silly question to some of us, but I think it's not. I mean, for me, it's if you look at this picture of these houses, they're literally connected. We are literally connected to one another. So connectivity is in our name, community, association, everything suggests that we are connected to one another. And our home is where our heart is. And that's one thing I love about working in this industry so much. We are dealing with the most important things to people, their homes and their families and their communities on an everyday basis. You know, we're not just shoveling money around or doing something that doesn't speak directly to people's core values with regard to their families and what's most important to them. But being literally connected means that our physical and emotional issues are also interconnected, and we can't separate those out. So our HOAs, by virtue of the natural connectivity that we have with them, naturally we have to deal with both elements or many elements of our kind of mind, body, spirit connection. We can't separate them. And so even though our role is to perhaps take care of property primarily, we also have to care for one another. And that's something I see as a real disconnect in our industry, because we're all, you know, we all are helper kind of people. That's why we got into this business. I wouldn't be this kind of lawyer if I wasn't just a natural helper. And I think John wouldn't be a manager for the same reason. And people who volunteer to be directors are also helpers. They want to care for their community and for each other. And yet the primary task of a homeowners association is to take care of real property and to run the corporation and to maintain the common area. So that is not, that's not directly connected to caring for the people that live on the property. And I think that it can be very difficult to keep those roles separate when they're actually connected. And sometimes they bleed over into each other. People with emotional or mental problems, you know, violating rules of the community and how we deal with that. And so it can be hard to know where your lane is and how to stay in your lane and deal with that. And I think we have a natural tendency to want to help people that are in emotional pain or have other difficulties. And, you know, we want to talk a little bit about where those correct boundaries are and the best way that we can do that. And also, finally, as we've alluded to already, I think a really important component of this is getting help for yourself if necessary. It's, you know, it's almost become, you know, kind of just a silly platitude, but you have to put your own oxygen mask on first in order to help other people. So if you're not in a place where you're emotionally stable or dealing with your own personal problems, then you're not going to be able to. John, why don't we stay back on the other slide if you could? You know, we need to help ourselves in order to help others. And towards that point, I'd like to point out that today's topic, we're talking about some pretty difficult and kind of deep emotional things here, talking about mental illness, substance abuse, suicide, and some of these topics, they're difficult. They may bring up some uncomfortable feelings in you today talking about them. And that's okay. It's okay to have feelings. They can run through you and you can just move on to your thing. If it's uncomfortable, that's okay. And we're going to talk about that and shine a light on it and address it. If it's more than uncomfortable and you know, if you feel like it brings up other issues, you may need to get more help with that. And we have some ideas and some resources. Obviously, we are here for you to help you too. But I think that we tend to push down and downplay how traumatic and difficult some situations that we deal with are. I know. Yeah. I am working with a manager in a San Francisco high-rise that's had 4 suicides in 4 years. And every time I call her, I say, hey, how you doing? And of course, the answer is always, 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 I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But she's not fine, and the situation's not fine. And you know, just saying I'm fine and smiling and putting a happy face on it, I mean, that's how you get through the day, and that's great. However you get through the day is great. But we need to keep checking on each other and caring for each other. And so I just want to tell you, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, but if it's more than that, it's also okay and necessary to get help for that. So towards that end, we have a couple handouts. I hope they're going to be available to you. I don't know if they were distributed before, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work. This is the downside of the Zoom thing, but I believe available to you is going to be one handout. And let me see if I can pull it up. It's this pink thing. Oh, Dumbledore's office got it. Anyway, it's a list of mental health resources on it's okay to ask for help. So that should be attached and available to you at least afterward. And we also had 5 action steps for helping someone in emotional pain. And I'm wondering, John, if you want to touch on that briefly. or if you don't have it in front of you, I can do it. And we lost your audio, John.
Oh, sorry. The 5. Okay, so
right. Yeah.
okay, hang on one second.
We will also make sure to have this distributed after the program. We'll send up a follow-up email.
Why don't we'll keep moving on, and we'll bump back to this, but I just want to direct your attention to that we do have some handouts, and one of them does have a specific 5 action step way to help someone who's dealing with severe emotional pain or even mild emotional pain, whatever. Just some kind of a script to help you appropriately help somebody who's dealing with that. So great. All right, let's move on to the next slide then, and we're going to dive right into our first kind of big topic, which is owner misconduct and nuisance behavior. And as you can see from my Zoom background, Dumbledore's office, I've put this picture of Professor Trelawney up here because I'm obviously the world's biggest Harry Potter fan. And I put it up here because the idea that not all crazy people look crazy. You know, she looks pretty crazy in this picture with her big glasses and the whole bit, big hair. Although I might resemble that at some moments with the big hair. But you know, these conducts that we're seeing, some people are crazy and they look crazy, and some people are crazy and they don't look crazy. So it's just a little warning, like somebody's personal appearance is not necessarily an indication of their mental state. And all of these nuisance behaviors that we're going to discuss could be indicative of mental illness or substance abuse, or they could just be people behaving badly. We're not really sure, and we're not doctors. But when we do encounter people who have some mental illness or substance abuse issues, it often presents in behaviors like these. Excessive noise, shouting at other people, could be threats of violence or other things. Trespass onto property, people going into other people's units or their patios. Physical violence, we see a lot of driving under the influence. You know, people tooling around the neighborhood under the influence, not cool. Property damage, and then other rule violations. And you know, every rule seems to be a little memorial to somebody who did something bad, but people keep thinking of new ways to behave badly, and so we keep coming up with new rules. And so these are just examples of different kinds of owner misconduct that we see that are the result of people's mental illness or other incapacity. And so we came up with some scenarios to try to give you some examples of these, and let's dive right into that. This is one of my favorites, Greg the grandson. So John, why don't you take it away here?
Yeah, absolutely. Greg is turning 40 this year and is a textbook case of failure to launch. He doesn't have any friends or family of his own, can't seem to hold down a job, and repeatedly has minor brushes with the law. After being evicted from his last place, his family gets together and decides that the perfect way to deal with the problem is to have him move in with grandma, who lives in a condo in a local senior community, so he can help her. Greg is delighted, but the neighbors, of course, are less than thrilled. In addition to being underage, he parks his car wherever he pleases without regard to parking assignment, wanders around the neighborhood trying to engage everyone in awkward, loud conversations, and worst of all, has repeatedly crept onto the patio of the little old lady next door late at night. He says he was trying to rake up the leaves and make sure her patio is tidy. The little old lady is understandably terrified, and the rest of the neighbors aren't buying it either. They insist that the HOA do something about Greg. But Melissa, what can the HOA do?
So what can the HOA do? Now, I have to tell you, these scenarios write themselves. I think John and I both have quite a bit of experience with people kind of warehousing their problematic grandchildren or children, adult children, with grandma and grandpa in senior communities. So this is not, we've changed the names to protect the innocent essentially, but that's it. So Greg, the grandson, it turns out, of course, had a substance abuse problem. I just, you know, buried the lead there a little bit, but so what is the HOA supposed to do? Well, they can't ignore it, right? So we got to do something. So the first thing we want to do is we want to identify those nuisance behaviors with some particularity and in a way that complies with our existing governing documents, particularly the CC&Rs usually in the use restrictions area, or in your operating rules regarding how people are supposed to behave with each other. So in this case, the particular rule violations that Greg was participating in included noise, trespass, and verbal abuse of other people. And these items were, you know, specifically mostly in the nuisance section of the CC&Rs, but also in some of the rules with regard to where people are entitled to go and how they're entitled to interact with each other. So it's really important that you check your governing documents for specific authority to find specific violations. You know, you can't just say, we don't like the way you talk, or, you know, your tone is bad, or, you know, you're just not behaving right, you know, because those things aren't specific enough to enforce and can open you up to other difficulties with regard to enforcement, including claims of harassment or discrimination, and we don't want to do that. And then, of course, the most important thing that the association needs to do to deal with this is to to put out a proper notice and hold a hearing. Now, I know I say this really every presentation I do on pretty much every topic. I have a slide that's like notice and a hearing, notice and a hearing, notice and a hearing. And it's not only just my most important and favorite thing, it's part of a board's fiduciary duty to do this. I don't understand really why people are reluctant to hold hearings. The board has a fiduciary duty to investigate any claims of violations and other things. And so having a hearing is just a really good way to get everybody together to find out the facts of a situation and to engage in that statutorily required, corporations code required, fiduciary duty required investigation requirement. You can get together, and it's amazing what you learn in a hearing. You know, you may be sure that the facts are one thing or another, but other things always come to light, and it is really really important to get that to find the facts as best you can, so that you can make a good decision based on that. The other thing is, particularly with people who have mental illness or other sort of incapacity, is to try and engage family members' participation. Now, there can be some privacy issues and other difficulties there, but the best way to help somebody who is not able to help themselves is to find somebody competent who's connected to them to connect. And in this case, we got Greg, the grandson's entire family, not only grandma, but his sister and poor sister, who has, of course, this ultimate sandwich generation person taking care of everybody here. But we got sister, and we got an attorney who is a really, really good attorney. In these cases, I'm always thrilled when people lawyer up, because it gives us somebody to talk to who's, you know, confident and aware of the law and can really help to translate for the family in terms of what's going on. And so Greg, it turns out, had a pretty serious alcohol and drug abuse problem, of which the family was fairly unaware until the hearing. And I asked them, when they came to the hearing, they said that they had already sought help for Greg. They had, first of all, they had talked to the local police department, which had not a diversion program, but a program for very low-level criminal offenders who, and trying to get them into rehab and other treatment programs, as opposed to throwing them in jail for this, or having repeated interactions with law enforcement. So they had contacted local law enforcement to deal with that. They had contacted Greg's doctor, and they had gotten a treatment plan in place for him, which included some medication, and also he was going to go to rehab for a period of time in order to try and deal with this. And generally, they had come up with a plan to provide actual help, and they had also made sure that grandma wasn't in danger from living with him, because that's not necessarily a safe situation for her either. Now, when I asked them why they'd done all this and why they had done it before, essentially, they said that they were actually unaware of the problem and the severity of the problem until I had sent a hearing notice, which was pretty stern, outlining all the things he'd done wrong, all of the CC&R violations, and in this case, it was a co-op. So we had threatened eviction of grandma on a very expedited basis if the problem wasn't dealt with. And they said that it was that hearing notice that kind of spurred them into action and got them going. So it wasn't a punitive thing at all to get this hearing together. It actually, you know, probably saved Greg and grandma. And, you know, I still get kind of goosebumps, you know, thinking about this family coming together to help this man. Think of him as a kid because he's the grandson, but, you know, he's an adult, obviously, getting help for him. And he was on board, and, you know, there has been no reoccurrence of the problem, and it's been great. And I think that it really underscores the idea that hearings are opportunities. They don't have to be punitive, and they don't have to be last resorts. They really should be one of your first steps. They help the board, as we've just talked about, to investigate, which is part of their fiduciary duty. They help to educate both the board and the members of the community as to their responsibilities and their rules, and what behavior is expected and the consequences for misbehavior. They help to identify the problem specifically. Here, the problem wasn't the actual problem was Greg's substance abuse and consequential mental illness resulting from that. It's a chicken and egg thing, not sure which one started, but doesn't matter. And it helped us to come to a cooperative, effective, cost-effective, time-effective, actually effective solution to the problem at hand. Greg was off-site getting treatment. He was not bothering the neighbors anymore. Grandma was not responsible for him, and he got the care that he needed because the community was not a mental facility. It was just a residential facility. So that was just a great result for that. Just a quick point about hearing notices. It's really, in complicated situations, you probably want to have counsel draft them, first of all, because it's just hard otherwise. We need to present facts generally. But we need to cite to specific sections of the governing documents. You can't just say, oh, it's a violation of the governing documents. You really need to cite section numbers and rule numbers and be very particular about what exactly the violation is. And this is other than notice in a hearing, this may be my other favorite thing. Focus on conduct, not status. Just like when you're talking about really any mammal, if we're talking about dogs, we're talking about people, whoever we're talking about, it's not because they're a pit bull, it's because they're being vicious. And in this case, it's not because Greg was an alcoholic or a drug addict or a crazy person or whatever it is. We don't know any of that. We're not doctors, and we're not licensed or qualified to diagnose any of that. What we are qualified to kind of diagnose are violations of particular sections of the CC&Rs, which in this case were nuisance, quiet hours, and trespass, but maybe other things in your CC&Rs as well. There may be statutory violations, smoking ordinances, city noise hours. So we need to cite those particular sections and not make conclusory statements like, the person's acting crazy or that they have dementia. We have really no way. I'm not a doctor. I think most of you are not. So we have no business saying that someone's schizophrenic or they have dementia or whatever it is. So in these cases, you need to be super careful to follow all the procedural requirements. These are cases that may go to court at some point in worst cases, and you want to make sure that you dotted all your I's and crossed your T's. And as a final reminder, I know I say this every time also, if you're going to fine, and these cases aren't really conducive to fines, those are kind of just encouragement for people to follow the rules. But if you are going to fine, you must have in effect a valid schedule of fines and monetary penalties. Otherwise, you cannot fine. So.
And for those managers who are just starting out, or maybe you've got a transition of a new board, one of the things I would say, as Melissa so perfectly has illustrated here, is the hearing, reminding these boards that the purpose of the hearing is not a revenue stream to get fines. It's you're looking to bring resolution to the matter, and this is an opportunity and a forum to do that.
I think that's just a really good point to emphasize. And I also think that sometimes if you can even not call it a hearing, you can call it a meeting or something like that in a notice and try and soften it a little bit to try and encourage people to actually show up. So great. All right, let's.
So we've got a couple other scenarios. The scenario 2 and scenario 3, we're just going to lightly touch on in the interest of time. So scenario 2, I'm not going to read the entire slide. Ultimately, for the community management individuals in the room, this is a scenario where you have a passionate individual who comes to the meeting and they want to go over, they're not a volunteer, they're not a board member, they want to go over every single agenda item at great length. They're not adhering to homeowner forum. They're shouting out from the sidelines. So what do you do, right? And so just want to make certain that you're the one comment I'll make, and then I'm going to give the floor back to Melissa, is simply this. If you have a person who has that level of passion in the community, I would encourage you to, you're going to lose the time in the meeting anyway. So why not reach out to that person before the meeting and see what you can do about, after you posted the agenda, hey, Alex or Alice, do you have any questions I can go over with you? Are there any concerns that you have? Is there any way you can channel their energy? Can if they're continuing to talk about landscaping concerns, can you get them to all of a sudden be on the landscape committee and channel this person's energy elsewhere and make them go from being someone who's your opposition to your most vocal advocate?
think that's just such a good point, and such a powerful way to deal. You know, if you can, yeah, you can really turn people from being a liability into an asset for you. And if you can do that, then you know, that works really well. And obviously now all of our meetings are by Zoom. So this has been a really interesting transition in terms of meetings for all of us. And for us, and I think for a lot of managers, I think we're seeing actually more homeowner participation in meetings, which has been kind of a nice side effect of the Zoom meeting. But nicely also, I think it's harder to be disruptive in the way that we had originally kind of visualized this scenario that we're not really talking about, but now we're talking about. You know, I think it's easier to give a big shouty theatrical speech criticizing everybody in sight when you're pacing around in front of a group of people. It's like theater. When you're on a screen, it's just not quite as much fun. It's like trying to slam down a phone that you have to touch the button to like, and I'm hanging up on you. You know, like it just doesn't work that well. So that's been kind of nice. Everybody's on a little bit more of good behavior, I think, in Zoom meetings, and it's harder for owners to be disruptive in that way, because you can literally mute them, all of our dreams, right? You know, mute people who are being disruptive. And I think that I've seen a little bit of back and forth with directors occasionally that's not productive, but it's harder again to do that in this kind of Zoom format. So that's been kind of a nice side effect of this. And then just one last thing for the scenario we were going to skip, but we're not. There has been some concern about not having a physical location for meetings that's required under Section 4925. I think so the governor obviously relaxed the Brown Act for legislative bodies and other things. For example, I'm on the Walnut Creek Planning Commission. We've been having all our meetings via Zoom, and that's allowed by order of the governor. But as usual, the HOAs are like the little stepchild in the fireplace cleaning up or something. We're like the little Cinderellas. And so he forgot to have a similar loosening of restrictions for the Common Interest Development Open Meeting Act. And recently I've had a couple owners complain that there's no physical location and the meetings held entirely by Zoom. And honestly, I have no patience for that. I think it's ridiculous. You know, we're in this emergency situation. And so if anybody, I'll go to court any day once the court actually opens to defend that if it actually became a problem. I think that's definitely owners behaving badly with that kind of complaint. So, all right. Scenario 2 that we weren't going to cover. Now we're on to 3 that we're also not going to cover.
Yeah, scenario 3 just has to deal with individuals who hoard, and so there's some information that'll be in your packet there for you to go over. But there's the approach to this is very similar to what we've discussed previously, and we're going to be talking about outside agencies that you can involve in basically right now. We'll go on to scenario 4. Melissa, are you okay with going to scenario 4 at this point? All right, Holly's living her best life at Happy HOA. She's got a vivid imagination and imagines herself as a fine lady walking the grounds of her castle, surveying the beautiful landscaping and keeping the riffraff out. Unfortunately, her perception of herself is not shared by other residents, who have become annoyed at Holly's frequent, loud, and critical outbursts directed at anyone who dares to be present on the common area at the same time as Holly. The last altercation was particularly bad. Holly accosted her neighbor Beatrice Laframboise, insulted her by saying she had baguettes for brains, and told her that her kind was not welcome at the Happy HOA. The board is tired of dealing with Holly and wants no part of this budding feud, claiming she is harmless, albeit annoying. Melissa, should they stay out of it?
No, they should not, John. So, you know, it used to be that we tried, and I think it's still our tendency to try and kind of slough off all these things as saying, you know, they're neighbor to neighbor disputes and we don't want anything to do with them. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I think we have in California and federally, we have some pretty robust fair housing rules that everybody has to comply with. And homeowners associations are considered housing providers under really all of these rules, at least the federal rules for sure. And so these rules, they don't allow discrimination or harassment on the property, essentially. And as a result, if owners are engaging in this bad behavior, whether it's a result of mental illness or other reasons, the HOA is not, they take on a great deal of risk and liability if you simply do absolutely nothing and try and claim it's just a neighbor-to-neighbor dispute. So the Fair Housing Act, definitely, the Federal Fair Housing Act definitely applies to HOAs. The ADA sometimes does, not usually, but sometimes. But our California fair housing laws, such as the Fair Employment and Housing Act and our Unruly Civil Rights Act, and some elements of the Davis-Sterling Act all contain fair housing elements of them that apply to HOAs, and all of them prohibit discrimination. So this can include sexual harassment or harassment on the basis of race, national origin. That whole paragraph of the UNRRA Act that keeps getting longer and longer and longer. By every year we add some more protected classes to it. So you're not allowed to stand on the common area and shout at people and make derogatory comments about them based on their country of origin. Calling them baguettes for brains is not okay. Usually it's a whole lot worse than that. So the fair housing regulations, the federal fair housing regulations, as they were recently amended, require the HOA to take action to correct and end a discriminatory housing practice by a third party. And this is very frustrating. We don't own the units. We don't own we don't even own the property most of the time. And so it's very difficult you can't just evict somebody for violating a lease provision by violating the law. It's not possible. But if you don't do something to try and end the harassing conduct, it can result in liability to the HOA. So what can you do? Well, not shockingly, it's kind of the similar things that you would do for any sort of other violation. And the key here is to recognize that it is a violation of laws that you are required to enforce, or at least to address in some way. So if you have the power to correct it, you need to take the power to do that. And these are the kind of things, if you get any sort of discrimination or harassment claim, you should call counsel immediately. It's not something that you can DIY. You do not want to end up before DFEH in some sort of hearing or mediation even. That's not a good forum for HOAs. It's not fair to them, frankly. So you need to call legal counsel, and you need to investigate. Again, our fiduciary duty as directors to investigate and find out what's going on. And the best way to do that, particularly in this case, is to call notice and a hearing. Now, I found that both parties in these cases usually think that they're the aggrieved party, and so they are very shocked to get a hearing notice suggesting that both of them may in fact be in violation. But that's just the way it goes. You're not allowed to have racially divisive altercations on the common area or anything else of that nature. It's simply a violation of the law, and you need to get together and talk to people. And sometimes people are chagrined enough to do that, to stop the behavior, because it's embarrassing, to get called to the principal's office because you're acting like an idiot on the common area. But other people can't quite get their act together that much. And so further refereeing may be required, and further action may be required. You may need to hold an IDR, an internal dispute resolution meeting with the board and the people. You may need to go to mediation, either a private mediator, or there's some community mediation services that are relatively inexpensive. In extreme cases, you may need to file a lawsuit against somebody who is engaging in extremely discriminatory or bad behavior against somebody. I think that's a pretty extreme thing. I've also thought about, but never done, having the association itself file a complaint with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, to nip it in the bud, rather than waiting for the person who's being harassed to do it, filing it themselves and saying, look, we're required to do this. These people are engaging in discrimination on our common area for which we are liable, and so we are filing a complaint against them. I've never done it, but I thought about it, so we'll see how that goes. But the most important thing is that you can't just blow off these complaints and attribute them to being a neighbor-to-neighbor complaint. They are more than that. You have to investigate, and you need to document every step that you take, because when somebody comes back to you, whether it's in the form of a DFEH complaint or some other kind of complaint, a demand letter or something else, you need to be able to say, oh, no, we did not do nothing. We did all these different things. We investigated, we held an IDR, we held an ADR, we sent letters, we fined people for violations of the rules, we held hearings, we did all these different things. And that is a whole lot different than doing nothing. That's a whole lot of something. And it provides a lot of protection for an association that's really in a sticky spot, because you can't evict people and throw them out for even though they're engaging in wrongful behavior. So that is what you should do. Now, another thing, and if we could bump to the next slide, another thing that is part of the board's fiduciary duty is consulting with professionals who are experts in the area that you're dealing with. And you may encounter boards that have doctors or mental health professionals on them, and that's really great. But like when you're dealing with a construction defect situation and you have somebody who's an engineer or an architect on your board, their job is not to put their professional licenses at risk to help with a personal or a corporate situation that they're dealing with as a volunteer. Their job is to serve as a director. And so if you have problems with a mental health situation, that's beyond the scope of your licensing and authority. And so you need to consult with a professional to help you. The other good thing about consulting with a professional is that they're professional and they can actually help you. So it's really, you can't lose about this. There are a lot of resources available. And I think that sometimes we're reluctant to call and we think, oh, they're too busy that nothing's going to happen. And that's possible, that nothing will happen. But again, you put that on your list of all the things you did. And so that protects you from liability, even if it doesn't actually solve the problem. But a lot of times it does solve the problem. So welfare checks are a really good thing. And I think we all have examples of situations where welfare checks have actually saved the lives of people. So you can call the police department. They have more ability to enter onto property than you do, obviously. They can do a 72-hour hold, a 5150, we call it here in California, because that's what the code section is. 72-hour evaluation for somebody who is behaving in a way that may be harming themselves or others. And this is not tattling or ratting people out. This is getting people help that they may need and preventing their mental state or their behavior from escalating in a way that becomes violent to other people or themselves. We want to prevent that. We want to protect people to the extent we can. It's not our job to diagnose them, but it may be our job to call somebody who can. Older folks, elderly people, the police can also conduct welfare checks on them. Again, I think we've heard terrible stories about people who have fallen and been on the floor for days and nobody checks on them. So if there's a concern, definitely call the police. That they, again, have a right to enter that we do not have and can provide some help. Adult Protective Services is a really good resource for adults that may be acting, they may be in the wrong facility. Our associations are generally just residential facilities. They don't have any sort of medical or psychiatric component to them. And if people need more assistance than they're getting from their community, they may need a referral or some sort of help from a social worker and other people who are licensed to identify, diagnose, and treat these conditions. And while these abuse, neglect, abandonment, isolation, we're not strictly liable for these things as homeowners associations, but you can make an anonymous call to Adult Protective Services, and they can come out and check and do their thing and see what's up. And that's a way that we can show caring and concern in a way that's appropriate and within our licensing restrictions. Child Protective Services is the same. Obviously, it's even more painful when children are involved in abusive situations. And if there's any concern about that, those calls, again, are you can phone them in anonymously. So people do not know who it is, whether it's a manager, the next door neighbor, or the attorney. You can call that in and report anonymously, and that's always the case. And again, you can save a life doing that, or significantly help people. It's not tattling. It's getting help for people that need help. So let's flip to the next slide and see what's going on here. We've talked a lot, John. Oh, John, you were going to do this, asking for help and how important, really, really important that is. So we have a portion of this slide is actually on the handout. So, but why don't you talk a little bit about what's going on with this, John?
Yes. Thank you, Melissa. I just there's a couple of things here. Ultimately, there's just a lot of resources for individuals, and the National Suicide Prevention Line, crisis text line. I think one of the things that eats at people, and especially now during this pandemic, is there's a feeling of like isolation, like I'm by myself, what can I do? Or there's situations where you interact with someone, you talk to a friend or a family member or a board member or someone, and you're like, I'm not a therapist, I don't know what I can do to support this person. And so one of the things that we recommend that you can do, of course, is here on this slide. There's different lines that you can share with them. And Melissa, I'm going to give this back to you in a moment. Another thing you can do is there's an acronym that I really like. It's called CARE, and it's simply just call somebody that you haven't heard from in a while. Ask how they're doing. resource, find out how you can support them both practically or, here, maybe even just sharing one of these pieces of information with them. And lastly, you just encourage them. Listening, believe it or not, you don't have to help the person across the street to make a positive impact in somebody's life. Sharing a positive word to somebody, smiling, being, letting them know that, hey, I was thinking about you, that is almost has a nuclear effect on someone who feels isolated and alone and it feels like no one cares. So that text message you send to someone or that phone call you send to someone goes a long way. Melissa, did you want to add anything else here relating to these lines?
Yeah, I think it's really like I'm a little bit phone phobic, like it's just kind of not my thing. But in these times, I've just really felt the need to reach out to other people. And I agree with you, John. It has a positive effect on both ourselves and the people we're reaching out to. It just far exceeds like what you would think a simple phone call or communication can do, because I think we're all feeling really isolated and frustrated, and so any issues that we're having are magnified again. And I think that, whether that's our own personal substance abuse issues or other things like that, I mean, and actually, why don't we bump to the next slide and we can talk about that a little bit. The app slide. I'm sorry, we're out of order here. I'm out of order. Oh, okay.
That's okay. I switched to it. We'll go back to it.
We can do that. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about substance abuse a little more. We skipped one of the scenarios that allowed us to talk about that a little more in depth. But I think that like we've said, unhealthy behaviors and mental health issues and substance abuse issues are really magnified in this time of isolation and quarantine. And it can be hard for those of us who have benefited so much from AA or Al-Anon or other 12-step programs. I know that I went to Al-Anon I still do, for a long time, and it literally saved my life going to those meetings, and now we can't meet. So it's really hard to deal with that. So there are these alternate ways that we can still connect and have these meetings. I know that AA and Al-Anon they're having online, or they're having telephone meetings. That's always been the case, but they've expanded them, so they're a lot more available. And that's something that you can do from your home without going out and exposing yourself to any danger with regard to that. And so I would really encourage you, if you're dealing with, we see online all these, hilarious, memes about how much wine we're drinking to like deal with quarantine. But for those of us whose lives have been negatively affected by alcohol abuse, it can be kind of painful to see that at times. And it can also push people who were very successful in their recovery into some pretty difficult personal choices that they need to make. And if you're feeling that you don't have any support, you need to know that, you can call me, or you can call John, or you can call, other people, or you can dial into an AA phone meeting or an Al-Anon phone meeting that can provide you with, that support and community and 12-step program, so you can keep working your program and keep doing that. And if you have issues with depression or other mental illness, I know that I and other members of my family are still seeing our therapists on a regular basis by telephone or by teleconference, depending what system they're using. My dad, who's the psychiatrist, he's really cute. He's old, right? So he's like 83. I can say he's old, right? So he's super old school. And I'm like, Dad, you cannot see people in your office because it's not safe for you. You've got a respiratory condition. You're 83. Like, this is not cool. And so he still goes to his office every day, and he's talking to all his patients on the phone because he needs like his office environment to do it. It's adorable. But people are still getting the help that they need. And, I know it's benefiting my family to have that. And a lot of doctors are still doing that. If the issues are, more serious or more severe, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and some of these other hotlines are really very effective in getting help. And you need to reach out if this is a feeling or issues you're having at all. They have a text line, which I think is great. It's, whatever your format is, there's a format for you to get the support you need. I also I'd like to encourage, looking into the county behavioral health systems. I was personally really surprised when I looked online to see the kind of community resources they had, and they were a lot more considerable and varied than I had previously thought. So, just an amazing array of help, both for maybe your association or you personally, or for owners or members or other people that may need help. There's a lot more resources available there than you might believe, and they're obviously very low cost to use. So, did I miss anything really important here, John? I touched on the law enforcement programs also. So
no, I think we would just mention that we've listed Contra Costa County here as an example of county resources. Of course, check with your specific county for what resources are available. I also love the fact that you mentioned the texting, for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I know there are a lot of us who I love that a lot of these resources will meet you or meet that person where they're at. And I think that that's great. And similarly, one of the things I want to mention, if that's okay, Melissa, we'll transition into the apps.
Yep.
And just want to let everybody know. Again, I think it's very important that there's no embarrassment in reaching a hand up or ask for help. Look, if you're in the community management industry, I know that you're a strong person with great customer service who is a superhero who can make things happen. And so you might go to yourself and go like, well, why am I struggling with this? I usually am able to pick myself up by my bootstraps. Some things we need to reach out and get help on. And so we just wanted to show a couple of things relating to these apps. These are both for iPhone and Android. The first one is Sanvello. I love this app. It helps track basic things like, have you taken care of yourself? Are you eating? Are you taking a shower? Things like that. And right now during the pandemic, they have the premium for free. So I think that that's great. It's a great opportunity to kind of get your toe in the water there. Headspace is another nice app that helps with mindfulness and helps change your focus. So for those of you who have been, right now probably in this meeting, like I got a board meeting tonight, I got 2 board packages to go out, I got a budget I got to get done, SB 323, what am I going to do? And that's where your focus has been. Headspace and Sanvello and Calm will help you in terms of like, let me be present in the moment and let me deal with things as they come. And lastly, Calm. Calm is another great app. And for those of you who have Kaiser Permanente, this app, which is normally a $70 annual fee, is now included with Kaiser. They announced it today. So just wanted to put that out there for everybody. With that, I'm going to transition back to you, Melissa, for closing thoughts.
Great. All right. So, like John and I, this has been really important to us to be able to talk to all of you about this. And, I just want to really emphasize, like, caring connection is our reason for being, and particularly in our industry, it's why we're here. It's literally our reason for being. So we don't want to deny that or minimize that in any way, but we need to be able to channel it in a way that's healthy and productive for ourselves and for our communities and the people that live in them. We need to, just getting back to kind of staying in our lane, we need to use the tools that are authorized in our governing documents. And if we don't have, there's no authority for what you want to do, it may be because you're not the person who's supposed to be doing it. So we need to think about that, and in our role as manager or attorney or whatever we're doing, director, we need to be careful to follow our governing documents and use them as a guide to how we're going to address issues that pertain to our communities. We need to really be extra sensitive to these issues of mental illness and substance abuse. They are challenging to diagnose and deal with, and it's not our job to diagnose them, it is our job to deal with them. So but in talking to families and to people, we need to be mindful of them, and the way we do that is to focus on people's conduct and not their status. Again, the violation of the rules is the real problem here, and we're just using our sensitivity to people's mental illness or substance abuse problems to get productive solutions to what's going on and to enhance our understanding. And towards that end, hearings really are opportunities to get families together, to get everybody together in one room and try and come up with productive solutions to the problem. As John said, we'd like to pad our party fund with fines, but that's not really effective or the purpose of them. We're really trying to get an actual solution to the problem, modify people's behavior, and get everybody living peaceful in community again. And so we may need to consult with professionals to do that, people who are licensed and trained to deal with some of the problems that we're dealing with that we may not understand fully or know how to deal with. They actually take classes in this and have training, and they know how to do it. So consulting with them is really productive for all of us, and also, again, helps the board comport with its fiduciary duty to investigate and consult with professionals. And finally, not only is it okay to ask for help, it's really, really okay. It's required. I mean, if you need help, you need to ask for it. And you shouldn't be, there is no shame in this. We all have suffered from, some sort of, I think there's literally nobody in the room or in the Zoom thing or in the universe or whatever it is whose lives haven't been affected by alcohol abuse or substance abuse or anxiety, depression, all these different things. It's not just you. We're not alone. We're all in this together, and everybody's affected by this. And there's no oh, okay, yeah, not a good time. Sorry. There's no shame at all in asking for help, and in fact, it's something we're encouraging you to do. It's wonderful and liberating. And John, I think you had some final thoughts to say about that.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Melissa. Yes, I just wanted to say to everybody here, regardless of whether you're a homeowner volunteer or a community manager or a vendor, and regardless of what company you work for, I just want you to know that we're all brothers in arms in this particular industry, and that you are appreciated. If you need to hear it today, I just want to make certain you know that you're doing a great job, and that make certain you take care of yourself. I joked at the last presentation that at the conclusion of this, somebody's going to run back to their desk and eat the remaining vendor candy that's on their desk, skipping lunch to get a board packet out or a budget out. And I understand the need to do that. But again, please make certain that you take time and you take care for yourself, because ultimately by making certain that you're okay and by taking time to go get some sunlight, eat a good meal, connect to that person that is in your family, it will benefit others around you. So thank you again for everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you, John, and thank you for having us, everybody. We really appreciate it. Okay. Rachel, do we have time for questions? I don't know what the timing situation is.
Hi guys. Yes, we totally have time for questions. If you can just, if you want to, you can just stop. It's at the top. It's like a red stop share screen. There we are. Hi. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to either raise your hand or go off mute for a second to ask it live if you feel comfortable with that, or type it into the chat. I'll give you a couple seconds for that. The board is meeting at the end of this month, but the likelihood is very high that the June Stockton Educational Luncheon will be over this format again. That is on June 16th. It's a Tuesday. We're sticking to the Tuesdays. We're sticking to the 11:30 because that's kind of like when it normally started. So we're trying to keep you on track. Hopefully you already had it on your calendar, so this should be even easier because you don't have to drive anywhere. And I'm not seeing any questions coming up in the chat. So you guys, A+. I am gonna do one thing. If anyone's opposed, just don't say anything. I'm gonna unmute everybody, and we're gonna try and get some digital crazy clapping happening right now. Okay, ready? Here we go.
Lena's earlier question, that definitely is Stanley.
Okay, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, speakers. We look forward to seeing you next time. We'll see you all next time. Bye.
I can hear you.
Sarah. Bye, guys.